Hello, 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 all my wonderful and delicious children and souls out there. Welcome back to the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast. My name is De'Vannon Seráphino. I'm here with the great and wonderfully talented Elizabeth Hendrick, who is the author of a book called Exodai, which is a shockingly honest memoir of love, obsession, and torture. Elizabeth, how the fuck are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing absolutely fine. Thank you so much, De'Vannon. Thanks for having me on your show. This is very exciting. I'm really thrilled to be here and tell you a bit about my book and myself and spiritual things.
Right. So this book, y'all, is an interesting mixture. It reminds me a lot of myself. It has a lot of kink, BDSM, and sexual situations in it. But Elizabeth does a phenomenal job of tying in spiritual lessons and transmuting and alchemizing the sexual things that happen or the BDSM things that happen into practical, quantifiable, real life healing, changes, and growth, which sounds like something that I preach to you all the damn time. So it'll be great to hear this from somebody else's angle. So we're going to be talking a lot about sexuality and BDSM and kink and torture and things of that nature, but also God. So this is so perfect for the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast. Thank you for sending me your book. I'm going to read a little
You're
bit
welcome.
from Amazon about this. So it says, the name of this book is Exodai. He says, Exodai is the first memoir Elizabeth has published. She was compelled to write about her struggles with her bring it closer to the lens so they can see the cover. There you go. Yeah, that's better. And that book cover is actually gonna be the clip art for the episode too.
It's
So,
blurred, isn't it? Let me, if I hold it here, it's
yeah,
coming
and
out because I put the
did
blurred
I
background.
because I've got it here as
There we
well.
go.
So,
Thank you.
oh, no problem. She was compelled to write about her struggles with her sexuality and narrate the story of how she eventually learned to love herself, placing particular emphasis on her S&M sadomasochist relationship with a Japanese dominatrix. Elizabeth believes her story will be of value, not just to the LGBTQ plus, but BDS and BDSM communities, but to all individuals who have been ostracized during their adolescence and whose lack of self love is sabotaging their adult lives. It's also an intriguing peek behind the curtain of Tokyo's exotic and sometimes shocking BDSM underworld. This book is the winner of the National Indie Excellence Awards for Sexuality category, a finalist in the National Indie Excellence Awards for LGBTQIA nonfiction, a finalist from the International Book Awards for LGBTQ nonfiction, and a finalist in the Next Generation Indie Book Awards for Best Book Cover Design for Nonfiction.
And
Congratulations.
I just thank you very much. I actually literally just this week I picked up another award. It's another silver medal for LGBTQ plus, and that was from the Reader's Favorite, another indie book institution, quite a high esteemed indie book institution. So I was really pleased with that. So three silver medals now for LGBTQ plus nonfiction, and the gold medal, as you said, is for sexuality.
Sexuality, hell yes. So that medal around your neck, is that for any of these awards? Tell us about it.
So,
Show
so
us.
yeah, so the actually the book cover is from the Next Generation Indie Book Awards, and that's the top institution for book awards. So although it was for the cover, it's still a real great nomination and a great accolade. And they have their awards ceremony every year in a different city in America, and they invited me to the awards ceremony in June to pick up this medal. This is the silver medal for the book cover. The other institutions, I'm still waiting for my medal to be sent. All of these awards came out in June, July, and August, and as I said, I've just had a new one now. So I went to San Diego. I picked this up in the U.S. Grant Hotel in San Diego, and I also went to the American Library Association book convention that happened to be that weekend. So they always coincide their awards with the American Library Association. And I think last year it was in Chicago. Next year it's going to be in Philly. So Philadelphia. So yeah, that's that. So this is one of my medals. There you go, and I'm wearing it proudly.
Well, congratulations, Elizabeth. You fucking earned it. So her
Thank you.
website Oh, absolutely. Her website is exodai.co.uk. I'm going to add that, the Amazon link, along with her Instagram, X, and TikTok to the show notes so you all can keep up with Elizabeth as you please. So tell us, what exactly does Exodai mean? And it's spelled Exodai. What does it mean?
Correct. Well, what it means, okay, so it came to me in a dream, and this story is actually revealed in the book. And it's basically a made-up word that came to me in a dream, and I tell the story of that dream in the book. But basically, it's the Greek word exodus, which means the going out, and ai, which is in Japanese, that means love. So it's truncated to exodai, which means the going out of love. And it's that energy that you resonate when somebody you love walks in the room. That's your exodai.
Yeah, I I I get that. Do you care to explain? Because this is basically like a blood splattered rose on the front cover. I don't know if somebody got hit with this rose and it's their blood on the ground or the wall. So can you give us some insight into this book cover, which won this award?
So I actually had to design by a professional designer, and he came up with a few mock-ups, and together we worked on it. But the the idea is that the red rose, the English red rose, I'm a British woman, the English red rose, and it's a beautiful, fragile thing. And if you look at the stalks, there's a couple of thorns on there. So every thorn has its rose, and then it's splattered with blood because what I went through was so utterly brutal. So it's like this rose has been kind of crucified, and it's standing up there on the front of the book. And it's just to depict the beauty of the love and the pain that I endured because of my intrinsic fusion between love and pain in my psyche.
How very well thought out. I love that. I really love that. So well, then we move on in this book, and you have this quote from the Hebrew Bible from Corinthians chapter 13 and 7, and it reads, "Love beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, endureth all things." Why did you put this quote from Corinthians at the start of the book?
Well, so in my experience of love, what happened, a lot of my experiences of love were just an infatuation. But when I was in this relationship with this Japanese dominatrix who's called Tomo in the book, it's a pseudonym, but that's the name in the book. When it got really to the crux and the depth of the relationship, when she had because I was her slave for 2 years, and when she had completely dominated me to the point of absolute submission, every involvement with her was a massive challenge, and I was going through so much pain and misery. But I had developed this notion in my head that I was going to save her from her inner demons. Now, it was a delusional notion because we can only really save ourselves from our own demons. We can help people along the way, but I had deluded myself to think that I was the one to save her. Now, that was a delusional mission, if you will, but in order to pursue that delusional mission, I dug very, very deep for love, and I tried to be as unconditional in my love as possible, and just kept loving her for every situation. So every time she hurt me, every time she crucified me, every time she degraded me, I had to dig very, very deep to bear it all, to accept it all. And so and there's this sonnet by Shakespeare, it comes later in the book, love beareth all, even to the edge of doom. So this reading in Corinthians, it says, love beareth all things, receiveth all things, doeth all things. So the point is it's very appropriate for the kind of love that I was applying to the situation in this relationship, in this torturous and abusive relationship with this dominatrix.
It's very interesting to me how we have a false perception of what love is, usually stemming from our childhood, until we go through all of this pain and chaos and abuse in order to figure it out. Like what you said, we can't save anybody. I tried to do that in previous relationships. And now what I've learned to do it be they lovers, friends, family, chosen family, or whatever, I give people options. I'm like, I see what's going on, and if they ask or if the conversation goes to it, I recommend this. Would you like to explore it? If not,
Right.
people need to have agency and feel like that they're really leading the ship, and they really have to lead their own ship. There's times we may need to step in a little bit deeper, but if you go and force rescue somebody and they haven't really done the work or don't want to do the work to change, they're just going to be right back out there
Right.
anyway. So we can't save any damn body, but we can offer options and see how
Right.
they want us to help them.
Exactly. Exactly. In the end, I think in this dynamic on a very deep, deep spiritual level, the dominatrix helped me very, very much. She helped me much more than I helped her. I mean, she put up almost like a whiteboard, and I projected whatever story I wanted to onto that whiteboard. And she didn't really have to do very much to make it happen because it was all going on in my head, the machinations of the mind. I mean, it was an incredible experience. But ultimately, I came out loving myself after going through all this, rinsing through all this incredible pain and wretchedness and misery and degradation and submission.
Yeah, I'm gonna read a little bit about that towards the end of the interview about like your thought.
Sure.
I wrote in the book about how what all she did to you actually helped you, and I thought that was quite fascinating snippet of transmutation. And I study sexual alchemy and things like that, although I'd never really quite seen it done like this before. Yeah, how you had mentioned like you thought you were in love, but really was infatuation. I've been in recent episodes that I've been recording, I've been really warning people about that from the angle of like polyamory, because
Okay.
sometimes, and your book is not really about polyamory, but since it's coming up, I feel like I just want to talk about it for a second. Because sometimes people get into, be it monogamous or polyamorous, they think it's love, but it's infatuation. And until we really fall in love with ourselves, when we're by ourselves and we're the most comfortable in our own energy, then we're really not capable of showing true, pure love. True, pure love is when you would just stare at a motherfucking person because you're just that satisfied with them. You don't their presence is your present. You don't have to have an experience with him. You don't have to do anything with them. You don't have to have sex with them. You can literally just stare at them and just be in their energy, the end. That is
Right.
true motherfucking love. But what I have seen is that people get, like, hurt in monogamous situations, then they go run to poly situations, and then they have, like, an anger against the concept of monogamy, and we must not do this. Now, if monogamy just ain't your thing, then it ain't your thing. And if polyamory just ain't your thing, it ain't your thing. We shouldn't hate either one of them because 'cause they're both valid before God. There's plenty of examples in the Hebrew Bible about both, but it's the motives. Like, we can't do anything from a pain response or a trauma response. And people be in these polycules with all these people they're sleeping with, and there are people they're sleeping with, they're sleeping with other people. And it's just like they're hiding pain. They're using it to self-medicate, and they're not really facing their issues. And they think they call themselves showing love because they're laying in bed with these people and having these adventures and experiences, but really are running from themselves and so many damn people that they don't really face themselves. What do you think?
Oh, I think that's absolutely, absolutely spot on. A lot of the time, when we don't love ourselves deep down within, there's a disconnect internally. And what happens is we start to attract people who will plug into that disconnect. And so, I mean, for me, in my case, I mean, I didn't love myself because I was a lesbian woman. I was essentially ostracized at school in my adolescence, and I buried a lot of guilt and lack of self-love. And as an adult, the way that manifested is that every time I got into a relationship, there would be all these triggers that was causing us to argue or to have fractions or just situations to blow up and become toxic. And that was coming from something within my psyche that was not comfortable, didn't love itself, was full of shame and guilt. And similarly, the person I was with had similar issues. Might have been that they didn't love themselves because of the way they were brought up by their family, or maybe they had an issue with their sexuality too. And we'd plug into each other, that disconnect. So what I always find is if you have a lack of self-love, And it may be in different areas of your life. It could be to do with your family, it could be to do with your work situation, you could be getting bullied at work. But most often, if during your childhood and adolescence you've had a hard time accepting your sexuality, that's going to set you up with some hardwired guilt deep in your subconscious that will constantly manifest in your adult life and will show form during emotional relationships. And we have to learn to love that. We have to learn to self-heal. But very often, people don't realize there's a problem. And I was in denial that there was an issue. I was completely in my 20s. I was having really a harm as a lesbian woman. And I was going and getting drunk and stuff and just so fed up with my sexuality and going out and getting drunk and pouring my heart out to people and blaming the external. All the time I was blaming the external. And I remember many of my friends said, why don't you go and see a therapist or a counselor? And I would say, oh, there's no problem with me. I'm fine. It's not me. I'm just unlucky. And it wasn't until I had been on this reality TV show, aged about 35, and it was a UK reality TV show, it was a bit like what happens after Shark Tank. So after you've got the investment, let's watch the entrepreneurs building their business. And it was a UK version, and it didn't do very well in the UK, so they only did one season. But I did very, very badly. And one of the things that the leader of the show, the media mogul, said was, Elizabeth, you're stuck emotionally, and that's why you're so unsuccessful in business. And I hated the comment at the time, but oh my God, it was the truth. And after getting kicked off the reality TV show, I took a long, hard look at myself in the mirror and realized that at a subconscious level, I hadn't accepted myself as a lesbian woman. This is in the book. I go into this. This is sort of in the end of the first half of the book. I realized I haven't accepted myself as a lesbian woman. And half of the solution is acknowledging that there's a problem. And then I went on to this, having acknowledged that there's a problem, I then went on to this 7-year period of healing where I was seeing counselors and working on myself. And there were lots of ups and downs during that time. I mean, I even tried to take my life during that time when I was living in Dubai. But that's what you said is absolutely spot on. Until we learn to love ourselves internally, we're going to manifest that harbored guilt or that harbored pain and shame. We're going to manifest that in our life experience.
I concur. And remember, y'all, this is something that is running, like Elizabeth said, deep in your subconscious. It's a learned neural pathway. And that's why you keep repeating the same problems in relationships as you keep dating people and it doesn't work out. It shouldn't bother you if you keep getting in relationships and breaking up. Like, they don't end for no damn reason. Usually you have one or two people who are not doing the work and who are not willing to tell themselves the truth. Relationships challenge us. They reflect who we are. And the beautiful thing is, if the Lord sends you somebody, or the divine, as you choose to look at it, who will actually challenge you and love you, don't you run from that person, because that is the Lord giving you an opportunity to grow and face yourself. You must evaluate your relationships around you. I don't care if they're lover, friend, family, child, cat, dog, lizard, iguana, whatever, and be able to render quantifiable benefits that this person helps you and show, okay, I've grown this way and this way and this way since this person came into my life. I am better. How? Because of this. Not just having experiences and having sex with them and doing sensual things, like practically, quantifiably, how is this person of deep value to you? And you got to be able to write it out, or that person's got to go, or so y'all got to change the dynamics or something, but you can't keep it. And then you have to reevaluate this constantly when it comes up throughout your life. I do that about once a year with every relationship in my life. We come up for review, and I also
Excellent.
and I also review myself. I ask them, how have I added to you? How are you better within this last year because I've been around? I don't want to just be in a situation where I'm just having fun with people and then that's the extent of it, because dark energy will get in there and keep you like anchored down. If you have superficial relationships, it's all about frilly things like that. And like how you said, you healed for 7 years, y'all, you got to take time in isolation. You cannot always be dating, always be having sex with people, always be doing the things with people. You need to get by yourself and get with the divine so you can hear yourself, know thyself. Otherwise, you're gonna keep fucking up or keep getting into the same sorts of situations. You can't give away what you don't have. And so until you learn to love yourself, ain't no loving relationship you're trying to do gonna work. And there's far too many people with low self-esteem, insecurities, having all this sex and being in poly situations. And you really fucking cannot be poly unless you know who the fuck you are because you're mixing with all those different energies and all those different vibes. You will get lost in a big ass ocean if you go into poly situations or you call yourself being the type who's gonna have more than one sexual partner or lover and you ain't solid in your shit. You and it's a slow sort of destruction that comes with this. You gonna have what you perceive to be fun and have all this sex for a while or a few years, and it's gonna degrade you slowly on the inside. That's how it works. And then you look around and you sit in front of a therapist, if you have enough sense to go with all these fucking problems and you don't know where they came from, some of them actually leached into you from the sex you had with other people because of the spiritual and energetic transfer when you have sex with other people. And some of those problems weren't originally your own, but now they've attached themselves to you. And so we really have to be careful with how we go about. I was curious, your book doesn't have any chapter titles or a table of content. Was that intentional?
Well, I've read a lot of books where there's chapter headings, and I've read a lot of books where it's just the number of the chapter. And I kind of I like the minimalism of having non-titled chapters, and I often find titles are a little bit trite. Sometimes they're very good, and you sort of think, okay, we know what we're getting into here. But I like the mystery and the minimalism really. So that was a deliberate decision, and I thought let's just read through the story. And I mean it's not a long memoir, and it's not, it reads very much like a novel. So it's not your traditional memoir, which is lots of deep reflections and looking back on past moments and talking about key individuals in your life experience. This was very much a focus on my sexuality, why I didn't love myself as a lesbian woman, where it came from, when I realized there's a problem, and the healing process. And with main focus, the whole second half of the book is this relationship with this dominatrix. And it's a ride. It's the whole story from start to finish when I come out the other side, learning to love myself, and the reflections on what was actually happening at the end of the book. And it's a lot of people do read it literally in one sitting. Slower readers probably take a week, but it's it's like watching a YouTube video. Sometimes they do chapter breaks on the video. Sometimes they start off the video telling you what's going to be in it. And other times you're there and you're on the video and you watch it to the end and you think, oh, the video just finished. And yeah, I see. We went on a journey and it's done. It's kind of like that. So surprise people. That's I guess how it works. It's a ride. Join the ride.
I love a non-traditional approach. I'm here for it. And it's a fast read. And like even though it's over like 322 pages. So but it's about the pace of it. It's intense. You don't really hold back at all, and you really go there and you take it. You take us on a good sexually, spiritually educational journey. Now that glossary you have in the back of the book gave me life. Now that was also another non-traditional thing that I really appreciated, and I'm going to read 3 words from her kinky glossary in the back of the book to help you understand some of the Japanese. That is literature out this. It is based in Japan, and y'all know I love me some Tokyo. So I chose the word hentai, which
Oh yeah.
according to the glossary of Elizabeth says kinky or sexually perverted. We associate hentai a lot with gay Japanese anime porn with like the audaciously monstrous Godzilla-sized dicks with like an ocean of cum coming out of it and drowning like the poor bottom in it, but I guess he's loving to die that way. Or whatever the case might be. The second word is shibari, which is a Japanese
Yes.
rope bondage. We have shibari lube, and there's a lot of rope bondage taught here in the United States. And the last one that stood out to me was Sutekinai Opai, which is great boobs. And so it got boobular, totally boobtastic. So I really love the glossary.
The pronunciation there is sticking up by.
Oh, that's right.
The little Japanese accent. Yeah, so hentai would cover the huge penis ejaculating an ocean of sperm. I mean, that is a bit hentai. Hentai is anything that's just a little bit alternative and full on and extreme. So it's not so kinky. It's kinky is probably the best translation. Kinky and perverted, sexually perverted is a kind of a negative description. Hentai is much less derogatory. It's quite fun. Or he's really hentai. I mean, and it covers a lot of things. It doesn't have to just be sexual. But anyway, yeah. So certainly manga, big penises ejaculating oceans of sperm would be hentai.
Well, 17 inches is the biggest I ever had to play around with, and that seems to shock a lot of people, but they exist.
Wow. Oh, wow.
So, right, what are you gonna do with that? So I'm gonna read.
Sorry, I yeah, just wow. I'm drowning in a sea of sperm.
Tokyo is a highly sexually charged city. It doesn't look that way on television, but when you're there, the people of Japan are conservative and they are taught to be that way from youth, not to argue, not to really render their opinions, but to be very private. Everyone walks very faithfully on the right side of the street, up and down escalators and stairs. It is very structured and peacefully so. The streets are clean, very little violence, if any, very little homelessness, if any, to speak of relative to the places. But people are very much themselves behind closed doors. There's entire districts of Tokyo that have like sexual places where you can go and do sexual things. You can go and get the drugs. You can go and have the experiences. You can go and get the adult books and manga and things like that. It is not shunned. You just have to do it. And this is not some small part of Tokyo. There's really nothing much small about Tokyo. You have a lot of large places dedicated to it, the exploration of sexuality in Tokyo.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can, I mean, there are certain areas like you mentioned where there's just nothing but sexual shops. But yeah, you can just go down a lovely little residential area and discover that there's an S&M love hotel. So, for example, Alpha Inn, which was the love hotel I used to go to play with, do torture sessions with Tomo. It's decked out for BDSM, and so a lot of the rooms are decorated like dungeons, and you have chains hanging from the walls and everything, and crucifixes. And the entrance to this hotel is just in this little back street, and across the road there's a nice little Indian restaurant, there's an Italian restaurant, and a few doors down there's a lovely little English bakery called Mornington Crescent. And you would have no idea that just across the street in this odd-looking building, it looks like a prison because they've got bars on the windows. All the windows are blacked out. You wouldn't imagine in the middle of this delightful residential area, there's this huge institution where there's lots of people doing some serious stuff behind closed doors in these different hotel rooms. It's amazing. So you have real contrast in Japan from just 10 meters away. You wouldn't know. The people who know, who need to know, but most of the people who go to that English bakery would have no idea what's opposite.
That's what I call hidden in plain sight. And I love the texture there. So I'm going to read the prologue because it's only like a page, but it really gives like a flavor for the tone of everything. So, and this is like the first time that Elizabeth is meeting with Tomo. I mean, they had never met before. This is like that really like was like my wow moment. I'm like, y'all started off fucking hard as going as hard as a motherfucker from the beginning, which makes sense for like deep trauma responses. That makes sense. So tonight I am going to be tortured
Yeah.
for the woman I love. The woman is not in danger. She doesn't need saving like a damsel in distress, nor am I obliged to go through with this. I choose to suffer. I will meet my torturer at 10 o'clock in a love hotel in the heart of Tokyo. I will be stripped naked, abused, and punished. You know what I've never done before is gotten the person who actually wrote the book to read. Do you care to read the rest of your prologue for the peoples?
Yeah, let me read it. Let me read it from the top. Here we go. I'll maybe read a couple of paragraphs, and then if you want me to go on, you can get me to go on. So here we go. Tonight, I'm going to be tortured for the woman I love. The woman is not in danger. She doesn't need saving like a damsel in distress, nor am I obliged to go through with this. I choose to suffer. I will meet my torturer at 10 o'clock in a love hotel in the heart of Tokyo. I will be naked, abused, punished. My assailant is in fact the very woman I love, and I will gladly permit her to torture me to her heart's content. She wants to see me suffer. She is my mistress. This is not pat-a-cake whips, soft spanking, or feather duster tickling. She will ruthlessly run me to the ground. When it is over, I shall probably be a few bruises shy of a hospital, and the clothes I wear after the session are likely to become stained with my blood. We don't use safe words. My mistress believes that true suffering cannot be experienced if you have the opportunity to abort. Her euphoria erupts only when her subject caves in under torture. She will read my face and know when my limit is reached. She will observe my suffering beyond that point, when through my eyes she can look into my soul and find true love. She will savor my affliction and bathe in the adoration bursting forth from my heart. Only my love will carry me through the endeavor. I will become euphoric. It will not be a sexual encounter, just one of extreme agony and ecstasy, a mutual expression of love.
Thank you so very much for that. You've already kind of told us about Tomo and everything like that in your first time meeting. In the beginning of the book, you talk about your time at the private school, and I want to tie this together with how you first even got the inclination that you had an addiction to torture. It was like a book, like your teacher gave you. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I guess I was 7 when I started elementary school. No, yeah, I was about 7. And I just remember I had this really nice teacher. She's called Mrs. Beckwith and we were sitting down to a history lesson one day, and we opened up a new history book and we started at chapter 1, which was the Middle Ages. And books were kind of old and everything, so that people had written graffiti in the margins, and there was always a common thing like, do you like, I don't know, do you like XYZ? And the answer yes, turn to page 65. Answer no, turn to page 171. And in this occasion, the question was, are you scared? Yes, turn to page 65. No, turn to page 170. Anyway, so I was just idly looking through these little bits of graffiti, and I stumbled across, because I turned to page 172 or whatever, I stumbled across the section on crime and punishment and medieval crime and punishment. And this history book, we were 7-year-olds, so there were 8-year-olds, 7 or 8-year-olds. There were pictures in the book, and there were pictures of men in the pillory, a baker all strapped sled with his bad bread around his neck being paraded around town, and people throwing tomatoes at him, and just these pictures of people in torture. This is I mean, they're very, very kind of cartoony. So this is children's reading book, history pictures. And I was just absolutely gripped. I thought, wow, gosh, I'd love to be tied up like that on a sled. And I started to have these fantasies that I would develop even when I was 7, 8 years old, 7, 8, 9 years old. And as I got a little bit older, towards the age of 9 or 10, I would go to bed, mum turns the lights out, and I would lie in bed for a bit, imagining these different scenarios of me in the pillory, or I'd invent my own contraptions where I'm being restricted and tied down. And I started to need to go to the toilet. And typically when we went to bed, the last thing we would do is go to the toilet, get into bed. So we're empty, so to speak. And I would be lying there having these fantasies, and I'd need to go to the toilet. So I'd think, bother, get up, go to the bathroom. There's nothing to urinate. Why? Because I've been getting turned on, and I had no concept that these thoughts, or I had no concept of the orgasm or sex or anything as a 9-year-old or as a 10-year-old. But what was actually happening is I was getting turned on, having these fantasies about bondage and punishment and humiliation. And so it was in my DNA. I mean, I was even at the same, I had two parallel things going on. One was that I was starting to be attracted to women, and I knew from the age of 6 or 7 that I liked women. Age 10, I told a girl in my class I loved her. And age 13, I learned that this meant I was a lesbian, and I was very sorry about that at the time. But initially, it was quite exciting. Meanwhile, in parallel, I had these very strange fantasies about rope and bondage and humiliation and apparatuses of torture. And so it all started from a very young age. And the first chapter in my book is pretty much that history lesson. And reading the book and running into the library in the lunch hour to sift through all the history books and try and find more pictures of torture.
Well, we all got to start somewhere. Do you feel do you feel like this was because of any sort of like abuse or trauma from your childhood, or do you just think that this was like the natural flow for you from you?
So I've never explored, but I've never seen need to explore. I'm pretty confident that between the ages of 0 and 5, I didn't get exposed to any kind of abuse. I can say that very confidently because I just feel very, very at home in myself now. And the only to unravel was this lack of self-love as a result of being ostracized at school for being a lesbian. And I've unwrapped that all now, and I wholly embrace my sexuality. And I was very lucky because that pain and hurt was hardwired into my subconscious from a relatively mature age. So I was 11 or 12 or 13 years old when that hard wiring started. So I think if you're trying to unwind something from the age of 4 or 3, where you've been abused as a very young child, much more difficult to unravel. But I don't feel that there's anything there. But this strange kinky interest. So I've got a couple of schools of thought as to where that originates from. Because the other thing I would say about BDSM is that all the people I've met, they kind of knew it intuitively. It was innate. It was a natural thing for them that they may have only discovered as an adult, but as soon as they discovered it, it's like the glove fits. This is what I was always looking for. And in my case, I already started fantasies from age 6. But one school of thought is that it can be a hereditary ancestral hangover that comes through in our cellular memory, or from a previous life. It comes through in a cellular memory. We may have been in a torturous situation in a previous life. If you believe that the soul comes into this body and leaves and goes to another dimension, and occasionally it pops back to Earth in another life form, that's for if you believe in sort of past lives. And I'm open to it. I don't embrace or I don't reject the theory. There is that one theory that it's come from a previous life. The other theory, which I really like, is that these things take hold of the psyche during birth, when you're born into the world. And so, for example, it's not peer reviewed, but I've heard cases where it's remembered. They have a theory that rain, so being urinated on, the people who get really turned on by that were often urinated on at the point of birth by their mother, and that fused into their psyche, that experience, and they associated it with euphoria, because being born into the world is a euphoric moment, and when you take your first breath. Now, in my case, I was due on, let's call it date X. I was due on date X. I was still in my mum, and I started to move. She started to have contractions around about the date that I was due to be born. but it was as if I stopped and said, wait, I think I'll just stay here a bit longer. And 10 days later, they had to induce me. Now, I speculate that maybe I started to move into the exit of the womb and got a bit restricted. And so for those 10 days, I was in this restricted position, having the time of life, but restricted because I'd moved partly out of the womb. And when they induced me, that all became a euphoric moment. And my speculation, because I love to be wrapped deeply, tightly in latex and rubber and really bonded down so I can't move. And there's a speculative theory that could be to do with how birth was for me. And also the humiliation thing is sometimes if ever you go to a hospital for an operation or a bit of invasive surgery or any doctor's doing, I mean, particularly guys are always looking up women's private parts. If you just have a bad vibe or bad energy with someone in the room, that experience in the hospital can be quite humiliating. So maybe when I was born into the world, there was someone in the room that my mother was uncomfortable with and felt humiliated. And that, again, that psyche downloaded into my psyche, that thought downloaded into my psyche. So I enjoy being humiliated. And enough for the pain, for masochists who actually get turned on by pain, they just they download the pain of childbirth into their psyche, which is why, and their brain has intrinsically fused pain with euphoria. And that's why they become masochists, because the pain gives them so much pleasure. So there's that theory. It's not proven, but it's a theory that I think sort of makes sense. For me, there's no doubt that it was natural, it was innate, and I was fantastic about these things in a very simple way. There was no trauma, you see. So I don't think it was any kind of child abuse pre-age 5, because I thought about these things gladly and excitedly.
Oh, that's why we shouldn't judge anybody. As they say in the kink circle, don't yuck anybody's yum. You never know the who, what, where, when, and why. We all have to stand before God for ourselves. And as they say, we don't have a heaven to send you to or a hell to put you in or nothing like that. And so we best focus on ourselves. Thank you for sharing all of that. Do you think Tomo reflected anybody from your high school? Any of your classmates?
No, I don't actually. That's a really interesting question. I don't think she reflected anybody from my high school, but there's this in the book. I get so desperate for meaning and guidance as to what I should do, whether I should abort the relationship that I know is destroying me in my life and my well-being. I did what's called regression therapy. So I went to see a Japanese bilingual therapist that one of my friends had connected me with, and we did a past life regression. And in this past life regression, it turned out that I had been a mentally disabled man in the 1500s in some Eastern European country, and I had been given the job of setting fire to the bonfire under stakes where witches were burnt. And I really enjoyed this job. And one of these witches was Tomo, and it was the soul of Tomo. And I had burned her and really enjoyed seeing her go up in flames. Now, and it was amazing because doing this therapy, we had this 4-hour session, and I put all this in my head, and it was kind of felt like I was imagining it, but all these thoughts were just coming to me. It was quite odd. But what was really, really vivid was the emotional outpouring and going through that therapy. And I've shed so much emotion that was really a big step forward in the whole healing process. Now, whether or not it came from me just collectively memorying something that the human conscious energetically has out there, whether I actually was in a previous life, it doesn't really matter what happened there, how I got to that. The point was that I had this massive offloading of emotional trauma that helped my healing process. So I think the answer to your question, she didn't relate to me as someone from my school childhood. I don't think, but she may have been in a previous life. I may have been her assailant in a previous life, according to this regression therapy. And so I think we had to balance the karma somehow, and that's all been done now. So we're all in a happy place. Incidentally, although it took me 2 years to get over her, and we sort of didn't see each other for a very long time, we're actually quite good friends now, Tomo and I. I mean, I hardly see her. I see her about 2 or 3 times a year at S&M parties, but she's always very happy to see me. We put all the past behind us, and I think we've managed to get back friends again. But that's part of the self-loving process. So you don't bear grudges with people, you see. You don't cut people off. So
Well, I'm
long
happy
answer.
I'm happy that Tomo worked that out, and I thank you for that delicious breakdown and being so transparent in your book and vocally telling us about your feelings during your past life regression. I wanted to read, as promised, this portion of 322, then we will get ready to close
Yep.
it out. It says,
This is from the epilogue, isn't it? It's from the epilogue.
It's the page book for the postscript. So page 322.
Yep. Yep.
So this says,
Do you want me to read it? Or
oh yeah, you can. It was just going to be from where it says slowly to complete.
slowly over the years?
Yeah.
Oh, why don't you read it? Because I'm not sure where you are.
Yeah, if you want to, it's the very last paragraph on page 322.
322. Okay. So slowly over the years. Here we go. Slowly over the years, I had faced my fears and burrowed into myself, going deeper and deeper until I discovered my true self. This journey had culminated in a 2-year boot camp episode as Tomo's slave, which had brought about the unpeeling of the hideous ego mask I had worn for 30 years. I realized Tomo had met my overtures of love with the exact negative equivalent. She'd sucked me inside out and dragged me across the threshold into insanity. But all along, God had been steadily refining me and stirring me to love myself, making use of the absurd circumstances in which I chose to exist. My relentless faith and constant application of love to every situation allowed God to work on me and heal me, even though I used that very same faith to endorse my delusional vision. And now God's work was complete.
So then my final question to you would be, what advice do you have to anybody in a similar situation who's caught up in an infatuation situation, that they're getting confused with love and allowing themselves to ultimately be abused? Because in the book, you do say that you believe that Tomo was a narcissist, and which is a very difficult energy to detach from. So what advice would you give to someone in a situation like this?
Well, I think the first thing I always say to people is take a long, hard look inside, because if something keeps getting triggered in the relationship or in a series of relationships and is causing you trauma, then you've got to ask yourself, you've got to face, what is it that's triggering? What's happening there? Why are you getting triggered? And I think it really, really needs deep, honest, hard exploration. And the reality is that there's a trigger that keeps happening, and just toxicity keeps arising in relationships. Then there's something inside you that is inviting that. It's not external, it's internal. And if it wasn't with that person you're having these experiences, it's likely you would be having the same experiences with another person. So we've got to get away from blaming it on the person and saying, okay, I've invited that person who has issues. They've got issues, but that's for them to self-heal. But because they've got issues, I've invited them to come in and plug into my issues and trigger me. So it's the very first step is acknowledging that there's an issue and that you need to do some self-work and self-exploration. And then the second step is to honestly take time. It's the most important time you'll spend on learning to self-love and heal. And I have to say, look, not everybody can fully heal. And some of us eventually have to put coping mechanisms in place. So in my case, I was very lucky because the damage was done during my adolescence. And eventually I was able to peel that all off. Now, if you're trying to unwind damage that's happened when you were 3 and 4 years old, you've got to go really deep into the onion, into the layers of the onion. And it can be done, but it's going to take some really intense, deep therapy. I mean, I've just read a memoir by a very interesting girl who was sexually abused when she was 4 years old and then raped several times during her adolescence. And it's amazing what she went through and what that was attracting. She became a meth addict. She kept ending up in jail. She had children. She kept getting separated from her children. And all of this was from this lack of self-love at a very deep level. And she unraveled it all eventually. And she's written this amazing memoir about how she's got over it all. So it is possible, but you have to really, it's hard. You have to work hard on yourself. And it's so, because one is so tired, one is so exhausted because of what this lack of self-love has delivered to us in our life experience. We become so exhausted. And the last thing we want to do is just do hard work therapy. But that's what you've got to do. And I really strongly advise it to get to talk to somebody, to read self-help books. Reading is a really great way of healing. Lots of meditation, lots of walks with nature, yoga, all of these things that just cleanse and keep positive energy. But if you've got some stuff that has got to be worked through, I think you usually need a counselor or a therapist to help you work through that.
I concur, and your advice is very good. What I would also suggest to people is in tandem with the therapies and all of the hypnotherapy, biofeedback, all of that, psychedelics. If it works for your system and it doesn't conflict with any psychomeds that you're on, I have gotten powerful healing and deliverance through inviting the spirit into things like LSD trips, psilocybin trips at the club with shamans in the field in Mexico. Alternative things like that help too, because psychedelics, the LSD ain't nothing but the Holy Ghost in the bottle as far as I'm concerned, because the things it brings up is, and then you also have like, for me, I have a peaceful way of looking at the most traumatic things when I'm on LSD. And it comes up and I'm very level headed and objective, but I feel it, and you got to feel it because it went in, but it's got to come out. And LSD for me, there's many plant medicines and many psychedelics out there. So look into it, pray about it, but consider it. And just feel it. And I have cried several nights in the clubs here in New York, high on LSD, sunglasses on, and dancing and catching a whole ass deliverance on the dance floor. And then I feel so much better the next day as I move forward. So,
Oh yeah, dancing is actually, I totally relate to that. I sometimes just get ecstatic just from dancing, not on any drugs or anything. I mean, I used to do ecstasy back in the day, but dancing is a great movement for the body. Just everything that's going on when you're dancing and hearing the beat. I love that. I love that.
right. There's a lot of that gets us back to like our primal nature. Like, there's a lot of
Mm.
primal, as I'm a certified fitness instructor. And so primal movements are things that we, like, say, cavemen would have done and things like that, but it connects us to like the earth and to or mainly to the earth in like a different way. But primally, our primal form is before we were abused, before we were traumatized. Primal energy is like a reset. So every time you touch a tree, a leaf or the dirt is taking you back to the beginning of all things. And it's a way that you can transmute that energy to heal and to kind of like reverse time in a way. And dancing is can be very primal. It can be very sexual.
Yeah.
The hips is how we can open our sacral chakra and different things like that. So let's dance our way to freedom, people. Yes. So
Wow. Yeah.
So are we going to do our dad jokes now? We're going to ask the lovely Elizabeth 3 jokes and see how she does, and then we'll close out the show with that. Thank you for going over time a little bit.
Can I just say one thing about the book? This won't take long. I just, because we didn't talk much about the torture scenes. It's a very, very raw and graphic book, and I am obliged to tell you all that there are trigger warnings. So it's a really gripping read, and as we said, you can read it in one sitting. But there are some very graphically descriptive torture scenes of what I went through under Tomo, and it is there are some triggers. So just you have been warned. There are triggers, and some people have likened me to Stephen King, who's a very deeply descriptive horror writer. Well, he doesn't just write horror, but you know. So anyway, there we go. That's the public health warning done.
Oh, no problem at all. Was there a particular torture scene you wanted to read, or did you just want to
Oh,
get
it would take too long. No, that's okay. We'll leave that for the readers to enjoy. But suffice it to say, there's electrocution of my nipples. There's flagellation. There's all sorts of stuff. There's even mummification and masked. Oh, yeah. Go and take a look at the book. It's all in there. It's pretty intense and raw.
all
From that, we'll go into dad jokes.
right? We'll go into dad jokes. So dad joke number 1 is, what's blue and not very heavy?
The sky.
True. I'll accept that. I'll give you credit for the answer is technically light blue, but the sky is light blue. And strictly speaking, you
My
can never.
favorite color.
There you go, synchronicity. And strictly speaking, you can't really touch the sky because it doesn't exist, quote unquote, because it's a reflection. So yeah, so congratulations on getting the first one. Okay, dad joke number 2. What's an astronaut's favorite part on the computer keyboard?
Escape.
You know what? I'll give you that one too, because that could work. The answer that I got from the internet was the space bar, but we can
What's
do
the space bar?
we can do escape because they're technically always escaping the atmosphere. That works too. I'm flexible. Okay, the last one is how do you very good. Very few people get 2 out of 3. You're smarter than the average bear. So let me see that's an 80s reference to the Yogi Bear cartoons that no longer around. So how do you make a water bed bouncier?
Okay, let's have a think. How do you make a waterbed bouncier? I pass. I don't know. Do you throw it out the window? I don't know.
You know what? I would
It'll
accept
bounce higher, right?
bounce higher. You know what? I'll give you all 3 for the creative. I'm in a very fucking good mood today. The internet, I'm in a good mood every fucking day, but I'm a little bit goofier today than usual. The internet's answer was to add spring water. But
Excellent. Excellent. I like that one. Might borrow that.
congratulations on being possibly the first person to get 3 out of 3 on the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast dad joke segment. And with that, y'all, Elizabeth's website is exodai.co.uk. I will put her link to her Amazon book, Instagram, X, and TikTok accounts in the show notes. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for being such a fabulous and transparent and brutally honest guest. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me, De'Vannon. This has been a real thrill. It's been a great time chatting with you today. You're a very good interviewer. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for joining us today and for taking some time to invest into yourself and into the lives of your loved ones. Please visit us at sexdrugsandjesus.com and check out our resource page, our spiritual service offerings, my blog, my books, and other writings that God has partnered with me to create. Find us on any social media platform. Stay strong, my people, and just remember that everything is going to be all right.